canned food, a can of soup will cost you $5. I heard that just as audible as I'm talking to you right now. One can of soup. And the Great Depression, let's say cans or certain types of food that they could swap. When they transferred that thing, it was as if it was gold in the Great Depression. Someone was saying, no, it couldn't happen to us. There are other generations that's seen way harder times than we've ever experienced. So this isn't a far cry here. I'm telling you, there's a divine shift. When the clock strikes 12, I'm not saying all of a sudden the whole world's going to go in chaos. I'm saying that we're treading on waters and these potential icebergs are closer than they've ever been before. I want you to hear this real quick. Inflation has the potential to cause the wealthiest nation on earth to sink. This will set the stage. There's a biblical idea and understanding that we need to understand. When the Antichrist comes on the scene, one world currency, one world nation, or one world currency, one world government, one world religion. One of the ways he gets the religion and the government is through the currency. He starts gathering the nations because the economy, it collapses. Once the economy collapses, he shows up on the scene with a solution. He goes, I can fix this. You can't buy or sell unless you receive the mark of the beast. Everybody picking that much up? And so there's this shift that takes place. Let me explain this. If you took a $1 bill and said, you know what, my great, whatever, grandma saved this for me, and it's the dollar bill that she had in her wallet, that $1 bill, if you chose to spend it in your generation, it would have the purchasing power of 12 cents. There's a shift. There's a shift. Listen to this. These are reports. I'm going to give you a report because we got to move on. I can't spend a lot of time on it. Food prices expected at the turn of the clock, 2012, 2.5 to 3.5% increase instantaneously. We haven't even seen the effects of all the storms that hit in 2011. 2011 was an unprecedented year. It was declared the most extreme weather conditions ever in recorded history, 2011. I preached the whole sermon, the earth's cry of 2011. I told you how the earth is crying out in travail. It wants Jesus to come back, do you? What are the hurricanes about? What are the tornadoes about? It's the earth crying out saying there's an expiration date. We're done. We're coming up on the point of the return of the one who created us. His name is Jesus Christ. In him all things were created. Are we still living for this king, or is he just an idea in our life? Is he your driving force? Is he what you want in your whole heart? Listen to this. Moving on. I'm going to skip a couple things. Take it easy on you. Potential icebergs 2012 that could sink America. Let's look at weather and patterns. That's a picture of Hurricane Katrina. I always like that picture. I mean, it does something to me. Look at that tornado. The one on the right, volcanoes. They're already saying Yellowstone. That volcano, it's way, we're talking thousands of years per se, overdue. And for some reason, they keep drawing a link saying, I think 2012, when we look at cycles, 2012 could be a heavy year for Yellowstone. If Yellowstone volcano goes, a lot of people go. Okay? So just look at that. It just depends on how much it just belches out. It was smoking a year ago. This thing's doing something crazy. The earth is crying out. Extreme weather patterns. Jesus said the seas are going to roar. I want you to hear Isaiah 24 real quick. It says the earth's going to rock to and fro like a drunken man. Let's look at these weather patterns as more of an iceberg for just a second. 2012. Right now, seismic activity on the San Andreas Fault. New Madrid Fault. Seismic activity. Volcanoes. Belching smoke. I said, God, what do we need to know about 2012? He says, know this, going into 2012 through 2015. He's starting to speak in 3-year cycles now. There's a shift. There's an expediting move of the Spirit of God. It's called an accelerated release of the Spirit of prophecy. God's saying, I'm going to release an accelerated release. I can show you past a few months now. We're looking into 2 to 3 years now. God's saying, I need you to have vision. I need you to have clarity. I need the cloud lifted. I need you to stop going in your prayer closet saying, I can't hear God. God's not saying anything to me. And it's like you're sitting there, and anybody ever felt that praying? It's like, where is God? And is God saying anything? Don't go into 2012 like that. We've got to open up the eyes of our understanding. There is a shift coming. If you haven't got it yet, get it. Isaiah 24, it's gonna rock like a drunken man. Let me give you some facts on 2012 real quick. Let me just share these. What are we going to look at? 2012. Earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes, hurricanes, tsunamis, fires, floods, and the year 2012. We're not going to get a break. I sat there 1912 came like a scroll. I'm telling you, like an old-fashioned biblical scroll just came before my eyes. I saw solar flares immediately following. Right after that, I saw extreme weather conditions. Let's look at 2012. Scientists have predicted that the wildest, deadliest global El Nino is building up in the Pacific. It determines all this weather. I mean, this stuff's getting hotter than it's ever been before. Let me define that real quick. What is El Nino if you're uncertain? It's a natural cycle that happens every 3 to 7 years. It affects the worldwide weather for at least 1 year straight. You're saying, what happened in 2011? El Nino determines. God allows science now to show us, because some people, how many know they're not going to get in the book? He's using natural men now. He's warning us of these icebergs that are there. 3 to 7 years, it affects the worldwide weather at least 1 year. The first sign in the Pacific, whether or not there's going to be extreme weather conditions, is how hot the Pacific is. And God, that's what He's speaking to me, but this is what scientists are saying now. Look at this thing. It's the hottest it's ever been in any generation since they've started recording this. I mean, no, you don't have to be shocked anymore. This thing's brewing up. Watch this. Let's look at this last one real quick. Potential iceberg 2012. 100 years later, as the Titanic is, so also will America be. Let's look at solar storms real quick. Jesus said there would be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. We've dealt with signs in the sun, the moon, the stars, different images before. About 2 years ago in 2009, I showed you all the things that are manifesting in our generation, in galaxies and all this stuff that's going on. It's just wild stuff. But I want you to look at this solar storm. I begin to see solar flares. Now in the past I've talked to you about EMP attacks. Everybody remember what an EMP attack is? Electromagnetic pulse. It's a terrorist attack where it shuts down the power grid. This is what NASA just announced. They're saying these solar storms will produce way better results than an EMP attack could ever produce. You may say that'll never happen. It's already happened. It happened in other generations. History records there's been solar storms like coming in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. The only difference is that generation wasn't functioning on iPods. They weren't functioning on iPads. They weren't have all this electrical stuff hooked up so that they could sing the name of Jesus. That generation wasn't battling all the electronic stuff, so they weren't as impacted as what we're going to see. Let's look at it. The sun's magnetic energy. Its cycle touches its highest level every 22 years, and the number of sun flares reach its peak every 11 years. Both of these are going to come together in the year 2013, making 2012 the year of the solar flare, or these flares coming off the sun. This is what happens when the flare comes off the sun. It hits a power grid. Okay? They haven't been announcing this for 2011. They haven't been saying this for 2010. They haven't been saying this for 2009. But even in 2006, you can find articles where it says 2012. There's such an alignment with planets and what's happening in the earth and the sun and the moon and all these things that we're going to see literal flares pop off. Let me read you a story of a guy who saw this. If you want to close your eyes without going to sleep, you can. 1859, 11:18 a.m. I want you to hear this. Thursday morning. A man by the name of Richard, I won't go through his whole name, widely acknowledged to be one of England's foremost solar astronomers, was in a well-appointed private observatory. Just as usual, sunny day. Just sees a normal sunny day. He takes out his telescope. He starts projecting an 11-inch wide image of the sun on a screen. He skillfully began to draw the sunspots as he saw him. On that morning, he was capturing the likeness of an enormous group of sunspots. Suddenly before his eyes, two brilliant beads of blinding white light appeared over the sunspot. It started intensifying. It became like a kidney shape. He realized what he was witnessing was something unprecedented. That's the year 1859. I'm not going to read this whole story here. He hastily runs to call someone, but realizes everything shifts within 60 seconds. He was mortified to find that it had already changed. He said, it says, he and his witness watched the white spots contract to mere pinpoints and disappear. 11:23 a.m. Only 5 minutes had passed just before the dawn the next day. He sees stunning auroras pulsating even at the near tropical latitudes over Cuba, the Bahamas, Jamaica, El Salvador, and Hawaii. Move on here. Listen to this. Watch what happens. All the telegraphers and operators, the telegraph paper on the aurora-induced electric currents, it begins to hit this, it hits the wire, still allowing the messages to transmit, but it started just setting the paper on fire. This this solar flare gets down in the electric, the message sent, but all of his stuff starts burning up right before his eyes. And he realizes, man, they didn't have all the technology. Like, this was a solar flare. And they start seeing them. And this season happened again in 1989. March of 1989, it happened in the northeast United States and Eastern Canada. And Eastern Canada experienced a minor geomagnetic storm. And it compromised the electrical grid for hours. If it happens again, this is what it looks like. What's that got to do with me? Banking systems shut down instantly. We're not talking about a terrorist attack. We know that they've already created the cheapest bombs known to man called electromagnetic pulse, which has the ability to produce some of this. But I'm telling you, 2012 is predicted to have some of the first solar flares that hit America and the world like they've never seen before. Banking systems shut down immediately. Any electronic device. This is the reason in 2009, the possibility of a reason. We're looking at potential icebergs here. That God says you need to have cash in your home. You need to not have a whole bunch of big bills. You need to have 10s, 5s, and 1s that you can make a transaction at a store, whatever, with just maybe hard currency, paper money, not so dependent upon credit cards. Some of you haven't had cash in your wallet in years. You've been desensitized to the idea that you'll ever need it. It's all credit or it's all debit. Just swipe it, pull it out of my account. We'll talk about it later. But God said this is not the year for that. I know some of you say, but I don't have any extra money. Well, we go to the movies. We do this, that, and the other. You got extra money. It's about priority. It's about stewardship. It's about believing that as the Titanic was, so also will America be. We've got to position ourselves that if it hit a grid, and it was out, let's say, in Lordsburg for 3 days. What can you do in 3 days? Are you prepared for 3 days? My dad, all of a sudden, for the first time, and I'll tell you, he's not a big end-time type person, you know. I'm so much more end-time minded than he is. But all of a sudden, the other day, he was telling me this story. He wasn't going to be here tonight, and I started communicating to him. I said, God's speaking to me this rare revelation concerning the Titanic. He goes, it's funny you say that to me, because about a week ago, it was as if this divine presence, Spirit of God, come upon me and says, get a backpack, fill it with 7 days worth of food, almost audible, for you and your wife. You think I got a prophetic gifting? Sometimes he has a prophetic gifting, don't even know he has a prophetic gifting because he hasn't worked out the details. But, you know, they asked Saul one time, or asked David, who's your daddy? You know, there's something about a generational shift that passes down to the next generation. But the first time it became so real to him as God began to visit him and says 7 days. I'm just throwing that out there. At least 7 days. That's a pretty fresh revelation. We're talking not even thinking about end times, and God approaches him and says, prepare. Solar storms. Everybody okay? Y'all make me laugh, and I don't even know why you're laughing. Listen to this, store food, store water. There's coming a time where I'm not going to say this anymore. We're ending 2011. If you don't have your survival list, I'm going to give it to you again. Okay, I'm going to let you fill it before the clock strikes 12. Solar storm have the potential to cause the wealthiest nation on earth that depend upon electronics to sink. It may take a while, but it has the power. There's something there. There's something that NASA's telling us that God has been prophesying for years. There'll be signs in the sun, and the signs about what? That Jesus is truly coming back. Is he coming back in 2012? I don't know when he's coming back, but the signs will always point to the return of Christ. Let me give you a couple things real quick, and I'm going to let you leave tonight. God's looking for a generation tonight, if you want to be that generation. When that boat sank, 1,503 people, they died. 705 people survived. 472 lifeboats were unused. I began to think about that, and God began to speak to my heart. He said, son, there's life out there right now. First of all, it's me. I'll show you in a second. But in him, there's going to be wisdom. Are you going to be one of them people that heard the message? Moving into, you just heard it for 3 years, but chose to say, How many know if Noah would have waited until it started raining, there would have been no Noah? 100 years, God said Noah. For 100 years, this man built the